We appreciate your patience, not just today, but through the weekend as well. We obviously had some investigations that are currently playing out. A lot of work to be done on our end, so we appreciate your patience. We're going to start this afternoon with Chief Magaw. After the chief will be Major Jason Johnson. He is the commander of our Internal Affairs Division, which oversees Saturday's investigation. Any police-involved shooting would fall under Major Johnson. And then when the major's done, Captain Terrence Shepard, who is in our Criminal Investigation Division and oversees our Domestic Violence Unit, he'll step up and speak to you about that. But for right now, Chief Magaw.
Good afternoon, everyone. This has been a challenging month. Let me just put that out there right now. And domestic violence has played a huge part in that challenge. In the last week alone, 3-year-old Kenija was shot and killed by Devon Wallace. The tragic events of this weekend started Friday with a domestic homicide-suicide. And then Saturday when Layla was shot and killed by her own father. I'd like to ask the community, please keep these families in their thoughts and prayers. To be honest with you, as a father, I don't know how you deal with the emotional, the physical pain of losing a 3-year-old. So I'd like to ask the community, please keep them in their prayers. The preliminary finding of the D.C. medical examiner in reference to Layla's death was that she was stabbed and shot by her father. This man shot 2 family members and then killed his 3-year-old daughter. I'm grateful that our officers were there to be able to stop him before he hurt anyone else. And I'm grateful our officers weren't killed in that process. Like Julie said, Major Johnson is going to come up and give you a timeline of Saturday's events. And then Captain Shepard is going to come up and talk a little bit about our domestic violence unit. It started last summer, but also talk about 211. Because really what this is about is asking the community for help. We're only as good as our relationship with the community. And that means getting calls and support and information from the community about the small things before they become large events. You'll hear in reference to Saturday's event is that neighbors had information that there were problems at that house. 211 allows people to call a counseling line that can refer them to the right agency to get that help. I know there's a stigma, believe me, about calling the police with domestic violence issues. 211 gets around that issue and allows anyone, a neighbor, a family member who thinks there may be a problem or an issue, to get the right agency's help, whether it's the police department or social services or family services. But it gets the county government, the resources of the county government involved in those situations before they become violent. And that's what 211 is. So we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. Major Johnson is going to come up and just give you a timeline on Saturday's events.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon. Saturday, early afternoon, just before 1 o'clock, our public safety communications received numerous 911 calls from an address in Fort Washington, 4208 Farmer Place. Now, we know and we learned later on that residence is the home of an innocent 3-year-old girl named Layla Miller. Layla lived at that home with her mother as well as her grandfather and great-grandmother. We later learned that this shooting incident occurred when her non-custodial father, Frederick Miller, arrived at that address and shot Layla's grandfather, Stefan Randolph, in the chest. Miller then entered the home, shot Layla's great-grandmother, and took Layla into his custody. He then got into a vehicle and fled. Now, we received a number of calls for service on this from neighbors as well as people who were involved. They provided a description and lots of information about the incident to the officers that were responding. When officers got into the area of the incident, having had the description of the events as well as the vehicle that Miller was fleeing in, they attempted a traffic stop. Miller fled from the officers, and a pursuit ensued that lasted about 6 minutes. The end of the pursuit occurred at Branch Avenue and Beach Road in that area, and was most likely caused, the end of the pursuit was most likely caused because Miller's vehicle lost a wheel. He was unable to travel any further, and he stopped. At that location and at a second location within about 200 yards, officers had an armed encounter with Miller that resulted in the discharge of firearms by 5 Prince George's County police officers as well as 1 Maryland State Trooper. At the conclusion of that, it was determined by the officers on the scene that Miller was in the vehicle and that he had received fatal gunshot wounds. It was also determined that Layla Miller, that innocent 3-year-old, was also in the vehicle and that she had sustained a gunshot wound. They provided aid the best they could. They also summoned the Prince George's County Fire and EMS, who transported Layla to an area hospital where sadly she succumbed to her injuries. And that is basically the status of the investigation at this point. I know Chief Magaw announced that there were obviously 2 autopsies conducted of both Mr. Miller as well as Layla Miller. And the results of that autopsy preliminarily as to Layla Miller is that she sustained these injuries that were inflicted by Mr. Miller. And that is the status of the investigation at this point. I know at the end we will take questions, but I'm going to turn it over now to Captain Terrence Shepard, who's the Assistant Commander of the Criminal Investigation Division, and he oversees our domestic violence unit.
Good afternoon. I'm Captain Terrence Shepard, the Assistant Commander of the Criminal Investigations Division, and the Domestic Violence Unit falls under my command. The Domestic Violence Unit was started last July with 9 investigators, and they are assigned and tasked with handling domestic violence cases within Prince George's County. The domestic violence cases come through our beat officers, and then they're routed to our domestic violence investigators. I do want to give out a few numbers for reference as I begin to talk about some of the things that we have going on in the DVU unit. First of all, I want to give the telephone number to the Domestic Violence Unit, and that number is 301-772-4433. Anyone can call this number if they have any questions about how our Domestic Violence Unit operates, how they handle calls for service, or if they have any questions. That office is manned Monday through Friday during business hours, 9 to 5. The other number that I want to give out is the 211 number. And the 211 number was established in the fall of 2013, and that went along in conjunction with our Stop the Silence campaign. And as I said before, this campaign was launched in the fall of 2013, and that is a domestic violence campaign, and it is a cooperative effort between Prince George's County government agencies. And it was started by the county executive. And those agencies include the police department, the office of the sheriff, the family services division, the office of the state's attorney, as well as the health department. And what this program does is it encourages the victims and abusers and other citizens to call 211. And these citizens are able to get confidential help. And what this call center does is if someone calls the call center, what they're able to do, they're able to route them to the proper county agency, which will provide them with services. And then they do a warm transfer. So what that means is they get the person on the line, they identify the correct agency that can help this individual, and then they transfer that person. They don't just give them the number, they do a warm transfer so that they are talking with a live individual. And as I said before, this campaign was started last fall, and along with other things that the Domestic Violence Unit and the Prince George's County Police Department has put into place, goes a long way to helping resolve some of the domestic violence issues that we have in the county. And I'll turn this back over to the chief.
Thank you, Captain. If anyone has any questions now for individuals, Jim.
Was a knife found on the scene?
Major Johnson, Chief, your one.
Yes. There was a folding knife, about a 4.5-inch blade. It was open in the vehicle with blood on it. and it appears to be the weapon that our suspect used against Layla. The contact, it was a close contact wound gunshot, 3 to 6 inches from, the gun was 3 to 6 inches away from Layla when it went off. There were no officers anywhere. We were much further away. But also we did an analysis on the fragment, the bullet fragment that we got from the autopsy. It's inconsistent with any law enforcement rounds on the scene. We're still comparing that, but I can tell you it was not a law enforcement bullet fragment. And after consultation with the medical examiner and with these findings, there's no one else who could have killed this baby girl other than father.
Chief, would you believe that this happened after the pursuit began, that he attacked the little girl, or have you discovered another motive where he may have done this before you made contact with him?
Well, we don't know, and I don't know if we'll ever know that answer. We show him in a video carrying the 3-year-old out to his car, and then the car leaves. The chase begins a short time after that. So somewhere in the middle of this chase, he makes a conscious decision to kill his daughter. I don't know what else to tell you.
She shot one time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There was no other wounds on her other than the stab.
I'm sorry, Chief, where was she shot in the body?
In the head.
And where was the knife wound?
A slash across her neck.
And where was she found in the car?
The front passenger seat.
I was unclear over the weekend whether or not Mr. Miller fired any shots in all of this, and not he brandished his weapon, is what the press release said. Can you clarify that, please?
As far as we can tell right now, he obviously fired a weapon that killed Layla, and we believe that he fired on the car stops twice on Branch Avenue. At the second stop, when he's pinned up against the guardrail, he fires a shot there. At the police. At the police. Yes, sir.
What kind of gun?
Chief,
yes, sir.
did police have contact with the Miller family prior to Saturday?
No.
Could you elaborate a little bit on what you learned from the neighbors? You said that you heard of some problems.
Well, I mean, we in the neighborhood canvas, we'd gotten some information, some broad information that since the daughter had moved in with Layla, that there was some domestic strife with the father. I don't have any more details than that. But what I'm getting at, and you know, it's always hindsight is 20/20. And what I want going forward is that when we see these things, a neighbor, a family member who doesn't live in the house, we really don't care who calls us or calls 211. We just want to try to get in front of these things as best we can. And really just encouraging the community to reach out to us. It may be nothing, and that's fine. And I also, like I said before, understand that sometimes there's a stigma about the police coming, you know, domestic violence. Okay, dial 211. Talk to the counselors there. Maybe they can refer you to social services or family services to get some answers and get some help. And that's really what we're pushing. And I appreciate everyone being here because that's what'll save lives. And that's what we're trying to get at. So, sir.
What kind of a gun was it, Chief?
It's a .38 special. Revolver.
When he was shot, is he still in the car?
Yes.
You just mentioned video, which I was unaware of. Was this dashboard cam video security? What video?
We have video from 5 different cruisers, including the state police cruiser. But there's also the neighbor has a video system. Is the neighbor or the?
It's a person in the neighborhood, yes.
Yeah, person in the neighborhood has video that shows quite a bit of this, but it does show him carrying Layla out of the house.
And she appeared to be uninjured at that time?
Yes, sir.
We followed some Twitter traffic last night. There were a lot of people who were following your feed, and I looked at the retweets. A lot of the people who were retweeting were also following Ferguson, and I don't want to go too far with the question,
Right.
but there was a lot of anxiety over the weekend about this incident, and I wonder if you might reflect on that, how it might relate to how agencies across the country have to deal with things like this,
Right.
And what your thoughts are.
Well, Ferguson is a far cry from Prince George's County, and not just in distance, but from my perspective, in relationships with the community. Our whole goal as a police department is to build relationships, and like I said before, we're only as good as those relationships. So that is top in everybody's mind, and what that means is getting to know people. And a lot of times, in this circumstances, you can't. The circumstances are completely different. This man shot 2 family members and killed his daughter. It's a whole different phenomenon. And I was speaking to Mr. Ross just on Thursday. He's the head of the NAACP, because I meet with him once a month, and we sat down and talked about things. And right now, Prince George's County has probably been in a better position than it's ever been, in my opinion, because of our relationships with the community. People know us. We serve this community, and our first responsibility is to this community, and that separates us from a lot of other police departments.
I also note that there is a flow of information that's occurring today, and that information appears to be part of your strategy. Could you reflect on that as it might relate to Ferguson?
Well, with us, in any departmental shooting, there's a protocol that we follow. We did 2 stand-ups on Saturday at the scene to give you as much information as we could. Yesterday, on Sunday, we put out a blog with all the officer information that were involved in the incident and the results of the autopsy that we had. And then today, 2 days later, we're standing in front of you asking, what questions do you have that we can answer for you?
Why is information so critical in relationships with the community?
It's about being transparent. And the only way you do that, again, is by fostering relationships and, in tough times, standing up immediately and answering questions.
Chief, 2 weekends in a row, we've had 3-year-old girls shot, killed, murdered. Other domestics, triple. Last week another one, perhaps another one this morning. You say to this community that's turning to, what do you say to this community about these things?
Well, it's heart-wrenching to begin with, especially about the 3-year-olds. I can't even, like I said before, I can't even imagine that, how the families are dealing with the emotional and the physical trauma of losing a 3-year-old. Domestic violence, a lot of times, and the saying with 211 is stop the silence about domestic violence. Domestic violence, for the most part, is perpetuated when no one comes forward. And what I'm saying to the community is, no matter who it is, whether domestic violence or you believe there's domestic violence, if it's in your house or in your neighborhood, call us so that we can get help to the people that need the help. But it's heart-wrenching to see families torn apart like this.
Chief, do you have, in your investigation, any idea what set Miller off? Did he have any relationship with the mother, where he had any visitation at all?
Well, what set him off is hard to determine. We know that there was ongoing custody disputes and battles about custody of the child. Also, his family has brought information to us that 2 years ago or so, he was in a major motor vehicle accident and suffered head trauma. So there's a lot of different issues we're trying to get at, but that's a key point of this investigation. This investigation is not over until we figure out, if we can, why this happened. Because if we can figure that out, then we can hopefully stop it from happening in the future.
I may have missed this, but any update on the conditions of the grandfather and great-grandmother?
They're both still critical but stable.
You said that he was in the car when he stopped the second time.
Right.
Did he fire at the officers inside the car?
That's our belief, yes, sir.
Could you just speak briefly about the officers who were involved in this and these moments of anxiety over the weekend, and perhaps a sense of relief they're feeling with the findings so far?
Yes, sir. And obviously when this occurred, and that 3-year-old was in the car, they immediately started first aid. Many of them had exposures. They had to go to the hospital because they had blood all over them. I mean, it was heart-wrenching, and I keep saying that word, but that's actually fits this. These officers were, they were resolute in what they did because they felt they had to do it, and I agree with them. But they were torn that possibly one of the rounds that were fired may have hit this child. And that's why we, at the medical examiner's office in D.C., why I think we sat down with them and made sure that they understood the circumstances. So if they could give us information that could relieve these officers' fears, they were very forthcoming with us, is what I guess what I'm getting at. And when it was determined that the gun that killed Layla was only 3 to 6 inches from her when it was fired, really was a sense of relief for all these officers.
Chief, with the 911 calls, was there any indication of abduction or any indication that he snatched the child?
My understanding, do you have,
Yeah, it was known at the time that the 911 calls were placed, and at least one of the callers who was familiar with the circumstances knew that Layla had been taken by Miller at the scene of the original shooting.
Did officers know that she might have been in the car at the same time?
That information was communicated at the time that the call was dispatched, and we don't know at this point in the investigation whether it. There's a lot when this incident happens. Certainly, with the double shooting and the pursuit, the radio traffic is very active, and these officers are focused on what's right in front of them. We don't know at this point whether they received that message and understood that. It's just too early in the investigation. But that information was known by our communications, and it was communicated.